Hello, hello, hello. All right, guys. This is my first official stream, so hopefully it goes well and everybody learns a bit of something. So we've gotten, I've gotten a bunch of requests from this little forum that I sent prior to this stream, and there were some really awesome questions in there. So thanks for everyone who did that. It actually makes my life easier that I know exactly what I'm gonna be talking about. And yeah, and one of the first ones that I want to start talking about, without further ado, let's begin. So Louis Solomon, I think I pronounced the name properly, he was asking me about this piece that I got to animate with the amazing Oddfellows. And maybe Joe can post the link on the chat there, or actually I can do it. Whoop, up, whoop, up. There you go. And around 30, well, I actually, first off, I should probably say what I did in this piece. I didn't do any of the really character animation. I did some of all the UI stuff for this. The designs were provided by Oddfellows, who did, Yuki Yamada did those. Someone asked about this transition, and I actually didn't get to animate that one, but we'll see if we can talk about how to go about that. But I did all the UI stuff here, and I did the entirety of this shot, which became crazy. And then particularly where I spent most of the time was here, where there were all these different elements animating in and then moving and basically changing into a point where it would fill the screen with them. And Louis was asking about one specific part of here, which was, I mean, there's so many different literally moving elements, but if you pay attention to this guy here, and here's a little trick for you: shift arrow keys to move frames in Vimeo. Yay! But as it moves, when it moves out, you see that it has this wipe of sorts, and it becomes into a curve of whatever. And he was wondering how to do that. And it's actually something that I've been wanting to get into, because, you know, you could do it simply with some sort of a stroke or something, but one of the key things to keep in mind here was that the borders are kind of curved. They're not solid borders. So that's kind of what I'm gonna get into first. And as you have questions or whatever, I'll hope to answer them as we go. So the first thing that I do usually when I'm trying to figure out how was something done, or when I'm planning on a transition, is to visualize it in my head. But because I can't show you what I'm thinking in my head, I'll do my best to try to draw it. And basically, knowing that the transition is gonna be like this, the first thing to do is to build the element like that. So I'm basically gonna do a big stroke like this. Hopefully you can see it. If not, that's okay. I'll show it in After Effects. But like, I want to build a stroke that is that way, that I can then animate and then add the border. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start a quick new comp. 24. And right now colors and all that stuff don't really matter. And you notice that my layout here is, if you've taken the class, this is a bit different than the class, because in the class I tried to strip it down. And we can get into like the F2 toolbars that I use and all these things that I use more. And this is even more trimmed down because I have one single screen instead of two, which I usually do. But anyway, let's begin. One of the first things I want to do, I'm gonna go ahead and create a circle. And I'm gonna just double click that path. I'm gonna control click here to zoom in and expand all the different attributes of this. And I'm just gonna make this the size that I want, the ellipse, maybe something like this. And then once I'm happy with this curve, I'm just simply gonna convert this to Bezier path. And what this does is, instead of being a solid ellipse that I can't control the points, this makes it editable. And the next thing I'm gonna do is well, right now I don't want this to be closed, because if I make it a stroke, for example, and make the fill different, actually I'm just gonna turn off the fill. Right now it's closed, and based on the thing that we want to do, this is not going to be a closed circle. So what I'm simply going to do is go to the path and select in the middle of somewhere, like don't select a point, and then just go right click, mask shape path, and select close, and that just makes it an open path. And that works with pretty much every other closed path that you have. So I'm just going to delete this point, I'm going to delete this point, and the next thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go in here and I'm just gonna add a point here to expand this length of the path. And that's basically my main shape, and then I can move it around and stuff. One thing that I like to do is center my anchor points, and I have a little script for that, but it's trimmed down in this layout. But I'm just gonna select the anchor point with Y, and then I'm just gonna control so it snaps in the center. Yeah, there you go. There's little tips in here already. Anyway, I'm actually gonna put it in the corner here because I wanna be able to control the scale better. Now the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into my shape options, and in here you can add all sorts of things, which you probably all know. And I'm gonna add the one that's called trim paths. And in trim paths, sorry, let me, okay. What this does is just basically, I can animate my stroke as I want. So what I'm gonna do is actually go to like 24%, and that's all right. And then I'm just gonna make this bigger to like 100, and maybe modify it here a bit. And that's basically gonna be my button. And now the key thing is to be able to make this borders that you had, this rounded corners. And this is actually a trick that I've kind of like, it's changed throughout the years based on different projects that I've seen from different people. But basically there's the easiest way to round corners I found is I'm gonna add a blur effect. I used to use fast blur, but now I'm going to use the Gaussian blur, which is supposed to be faster. I'm just going to blur it out to, I don't know, let's say 25. And then the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to play with the levels. So I'm going to add an effect levels. And in levels, usually you can control the colors and stuff, but in After Effects you are able to control the alpha of the levels. I can remove the preview window if that's on the way, actually. Yeah. Or I can move, is that better? Maybe I should do that. And I might just move the overlay so you can see better. Yeah, good idea. I'll move it to my bottom right. Yay, hopefully that works. Okay, editing on the spot here. No problem. So okay, now that we have the levels and the alpha, then I can play with this, and what it does, it just crunches the levels of the alpha, and because it's blurred, it's trying to get the borders. And then I can just put it, like if I go completely like 181 to 183, it gets too rough. It's too tight. So you want it to be a little bit soft. And then there we have our border already done with very simple effect. And I actually have this like made as a preset, and you can always make new presets by well, how did I do create a preset anymore? Animation, save animation preset. And basically what this does, you can just save an FFX file with all the properties that you have. So my Gaussian blur, my level. So if I need to add this a whole bunch of times, I can just create a preset, and then when I look for it here, it would find it for me. So the next thing will be to simply just animate it, really. So now that I have this, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna play with the start, the end, and the offset. So if we could look back at our reference here, it starts going up there and then to the end. So what I'll do is starts here, and I'm actually gonna start it maybe a bit over here. Let me move maybe 10 frames, and then I'm gonna add a bit of an anticipation here just by simply moving the offset. And then after that, what I want to happen is I want the end to go all the way here, and then alongside the start. And you can see, because I have my blur and my levels going on here, that it keeps my borders all smooth and beautiful. And then that's just a matter of playing with the curves. So right now I'm just gonna do something very quick. So it slows down there. Maybe even a bit of a curve here. And then once it's here, I wanted the end one to animate before. I'm actually gonna keep the keyframes there, but I'm just gonna modify the curves. So and it's pretty much already getting there, as you can see. And this one will just start a bit slower and then catch up eventually. And I can just offset this even a bit more to make it smoother. And there you go. That's basically that little transition. And another thing that you notice in here is that I have one inner color and one outer. And they're basically just duplicated, and they're basically the same shape. But what I did is basically play with the levels in the one below it and expanded it a bit. And right now you won't be able to see the difference because of the same color, but if I make this white, then you can see this. And then because they're the same same stroke, it'll follow the same path, and I can even offset this by 1 frame or maybe 2 to give it a bit of a, maybe that was too much, maybe just 1 frame. And there you go. That's basically how this part was done. So hopefully that answered Louis' question, which was how that little part was animated. And now you can see that there's tons of little things in here, and yeah, really, it was just a matter of going one by one and animating each one the way I wanted. So it's quite a bit of work, but you know, that's animation, and that's why I love it. So okay, so next one, actually there's some questions. How much time does it take to complete a shot like this? From start to finish, file animation, not storyboarding. Okay, so this shot, someone was asking that same question. And I mean, the thing about this shot is interesting because I started it, and basically I was handed out this frame, right? That was 1 frame from the artist, from Yuki, and then the following frame was this, right? So that was what, like, that's second 33, and the frame before it's 26. So it's like almost 10 seconds that I'm supposed to fill with animation. I'm like, great. So one of the challenges was to be able to know how to fill. So that's when I came up with like maybe maybe this wipe reveals this like X-ray underneath, and that brings us into this world. And then what I did was like divided it in 3 parts. So I grabbed all the designs and I mocked this frame first, and then this was the second frame, and then ultimately will be this full frame. And that I just did in Photoshop, just grabbing the elements from the designer just to kind of figure out the design for those sections. And then from there I started animating, and I actually had to do it twice. Like I animated the whole shot once, and then it was kind of all over the place, so I had to do it again. And the only way to know that I had to do it again was by finishing it and seeing that it wasn't quite working. So when I did it again and all that, in total was probably about between 30 and, I don't know, between 20 and 30 hours of like just animation work, like, you know, it's spread out in, I don't know how many weeks, maybe 1 or 2 weeks. So that's roughly, what would that be? And then the other question was, when are you using speed graph and when you prefer use value graph? Aha. Well, that is a tricky question actually, because it kind of depends what you need it for. Almost always when I'm doing simple position animations, I will always separate my dimensions to use the value graph. But sometimes for quick things and quick bounces and irregular moves, I'll keep it with the speed graph, because in those cases I do want to control the speed and not necessarily the placement of things. That's a very broad answer. It would kind of have to be specific to a certain, I don't know, element. But let's move on to the next one, by John. Oh, how do you transform the backpack into a rectangle? How did I transform the backpack into a rectangle? Let's see, I don't remember. Yes. I remember this part now. That one was simply with a shape with rounded corners. So like if I do want to simply just create a shape that has rounded corners, I can simply create a rectangle. Let's say it's something about this size. And because it's going to be a shape that doesn't really morph other than scaling and other ways, you can add what it's called the round corners in a shape. So you go into like the add and then round corners, and that kind of gives you that control that you want. And it's quite handy, this little attribute here. And I basically just use that, and I converted to Bezier paths, and I just made sure that I matched this shape to the design of the backpack, and then I just simply animated it to fill the frame as I wanted. So that's the simple answer. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the next one by John, and he was asking about this specific moment. And I actually didn't do this, but I think it's a very good question. So Matisse, who's an amazing animator, I actually got to work with him for like a week when he was at Giant, and now he's at Buck Sydney, and amazing people there. I think he's in Sydney. Anyway, he's a Buck. But he did this part, which is an awesome section. I'm gonna post this link here. And it's I mean, there's so many low bits here, but John's question was about 6 seconds in, the transition with the doctor spread out into a diagonal grid is really neat. Wondering if it's just keyframe with a lot of patience, or if there's an expression technique to do this. Now, I can't really say exactly how Matisse did it. I can only say how I would do it, and I usually tend to go to like big ways of doing things that maybe could have been much simpler, and that's probably because there's just way smarter people than me that could do it way better. But the way I would do it is actually, I would basically mock it up first in Illustrator, and I would create a grid of, let's say, just simple circles, and I won't do too many, but I'll just do a bunch here. Let's say this is our grid of circles. I'm just gonna group it all and center it, and I'm gonna ungroup them. And then here's a little Illustrator trick. If you have a layer with a whole bunch of paths in it, you can just go into this little drop-down menu, and you can release layers to sequence. And what it does is creates each single path into a single layer, and I just move it out of the layer, delete the empty one, and now each shape has its own layer. And I'm just gonna go ahead and save this. I'll call it whatever, circles. And then when I'm into After Effects, I'll go this test one. We'll start a new one. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring all these little circles in here, and in my options I'm gonna retain layer sizes. Not that that really matters, but I guess I just do that all the time, so I'm gonna keep on doing it. And when I bring it into After Effects, I'll have all my layers separated. Now I could potentially bring this all as a one layer, and then in After Effects I can use one of the menu scripts that explodes all the shapes layers into different layers. But I've been doing it like this for so long that my mind just works faster this way than separating and stuff. And I also, for some reason, I feel like it's faster. I could be completely wrong, but I feel like Illustrator files manage a little bit faster than a whole bunch of shapes with all the different properties. I could be completely wrong, but that's just how it feels to me. So basically, I have all these little circles, and yeah, I mean, the way I would go about it is if I were to like, just let's pre-compose one of the circle, and I'll call it circle 1. And I'm gonna animate this guy very quickly from 0 to 100, and then back to, I don't know, something like this, and then 83 to end at 80. So here's a nice little value graph that I'm not gonna spend too much time on. I'll just let's say I'll just put some ease, and then I want it to start slow. I'm gonna make this kind of like this, and then I just want it to snap back a little bit this way. See how that feels? Nope, too fast at the end, too slow at the beginning, so let's tweak a bit. Okay, whatever. Let's say this works. Maybe it should be a bit faster. I'm just gonna grab it all with Alt selected, compress them. There you go, whatever. It's not perfect, but it does the trick for now. So that's my circle 1. And then what I'm gonna do is actually select all these layers and Alt click, replace all of them with my new circle 1. And what it does basically is just grabbing that Illustrator footage and replacing it with my pre-comp. And I would just go like, I would grab my first 4 and I would put them at the very beginning, and then I would move on and select maybe these ones. And I don't know if that's what he did. This is what I would do. And even if it's a ton of them, this is what I would do, because I don't know, sometimes doing things like this, it's faster than actually figuring out a script that will do it faster for you, because you only need to do it once. So it's that's just kind of how I would do it. And then I would select this. So I'm just selecting the order and moving them where I want them. And there you go. It's a very quick way of doing that. And of course, when you have, I don't know how many he has, it's like at least 3 or 4 times more than this, but I mean, if only it took me this long to do these, it can't be that much to do the rest. And the good thing about doing it this way is that you have much more control, I think. But again, there's probably a much better, faster way to do this. Now, once we have here, another thing that I don't think he necessarily asked, but I want to touch on it because it's something that I use quite a bit. So you see how they all come in, and then they all, woof, they all scale up. Now, obviously, there's a cut there from one shot to the next, but I really love the way that he was able to spread them all out evenly at a very similar speed. And it's something that I was trying to figure out, oh, how did he do that? And I don't know, again, if this is how Matisse did it, but what I would do is, like, I would create a null, and I call it the master scaler. And then I would link all my little circles, and since they're all the same label group, same color, I'm just gonna select label group, select them all, and parent to my master scaler. Now this, what it does is that it's controlling the scale of all of them through one null. But that's not necessarily what I want to do. What I want to do is to actually control simply the position of these through the scale controller, if that makes sense. And there's actually a nice little expression that does this for you. And I've talked about this before, but I do have a document for my tips and tricks that I use a lot. Or actually, where is it? Sorry, 1 second. I have the spreadsheet that I think I've shared with you all before. It's full of like little shortcuts and expressions that I use all the time, and a bunch of people have added a whole bunch of things that I use as well. But there's one here that we will be using for this right now, which is called, ooh, it's slow. It's not this one. Exponential scale, nope. Nope. Okay, it's called maintain scale when parented. And I'm not gonna get into what exactly this expression does, because it's even a bit more complicated than, you know, I would like to understand. But basically, it remains a scale no matter what the parent is. It forces a scale no matter what the parent is. And if someone wants to go and break down this expression for the rest of us, please go for it. But for now, I'll just copy paste it for the sake of time. But basically what I'm gonna do is copy that expression and paste it here. And I actually have an FD toolbar for that. So I would just go on my scale and I would click, this is kind of disorganized, I should organize it, but it's main scale. And that basically just applies that same expression. And then I'm just gonna copy this scale and paste it in all of them, right? So now when I scale, check this out, this is the magic point. When I scale it, it scales the position. What? Anyway, this is really cool. I love this. But you can scale the position of all of them without making them bigger or smaller. So that's the fun part. I want to see your comments. I want to see if this is actually exciting to you as it is for me when I discovered it. Anyway, so here, for example, we're gonna make them all animate. So I want them to all come in, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a scale here and a bit of an anticipation as they all come in together, and then I want to explode them into however many of them. And in theory, you could make it like it doesn't have to be uniform. You know, I can make them a little bit like this, and when it's circles, it seems to work well. Sometimes it goes funky when it's not a uniform scale, but for now it seems to be working okay. So I'm just gonna go ahead, select all this, put some eases, so the anticipation happens like this, and then it just goes crazy. Now, while we're at this, I want to actually talk about another little tip that I like to use quite a bit. And it's, let's say that our little circle is not just a circle, it's got a bit of I don't know, a blue side. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to track the matte so it's just masking what's underneath. Little tipped right there. so what if they're all kind of like this little half blue whatever circles, and instead of just scaling, so when this scales, I want them to also rotate, similar to what Matisse did. Where's it? So if you notice, when they scale up, they kind of grow as well. So they all, and then they, wow. So they kind of rotate. They do a little rotation there. So I wanna recreate that. So I'm gonna create a rotation here, and maybe move a bit here. And by this point, I don't know, I want them to be completely 90 degrees, I guess. But the thing is, like, I don't want the faces, I want the lines to always be horizontal, you know, like, well, first I'm gonna make the same speed. So I'm just gonna grab this keyframes, and I'm gonna use this little plugin that I use called Ease Copy. And what it does, I just copy the keyframes, and I'm gonna paste the ease. So basically just paste, you see how it is right now. I just paste the, oh, I didn't select it. I can just paste the ease, and maintains the speed of the keyframes of the other one. And I'm actually gonna modify this scale a bit so it fills our screen nicely, like this. Okay, so now you see that all the rotations are rotating because of the null that I have going on here. And one easy way to avoid that from happening and keep the rotation always facing the same place, I'm just gonna alt-click rotation, and I'm gonna link the rotation to the master scaler, and I'm gonna multiply by 1, minus 1, and that basically just inverts the rotation. And that's why, yeah, I remember that, why that's a stupid idea, actually. So that's when the scaling goes wonky. So that's why I'm gonna remove this and just keep it to whatever, 500 by 500. Anyway, we'll find a way to not do that in a different time. But for now, we'll just pretend that the scale that I have is uniform, so that thing doesn't happen. And you notice that this guy, the one that I added the -1 rotation, always remains vertical, as while the others are rotating. And because they all have the same rotation, I can simply copy this rotation and paste them in all these guys. And there you have it. We have a little animation in, rotation, and they all maintain the rotation. What? So cool. Yay, that's awesome. So that wonky scale, that's when things go crazy. So that's basically how I would approach this shot. I mean, obviously each composition here will be different, and but there will be a base animation that I would do first. I would probably just play with all the heads first, and then remove and replace bodies as needed. But I mean, Matisse might have done it in a way more smarter way, and I wouldn't be surprised if he did. But yeah, so that's the second one. And yeah, wow, we've gone through 2 already, and it's already 1:30. What? Let's see if there's some questions. What's the most useful plugin for After Effects? I want faster workflow. Well, I would say Ease Copy is something that I use probably the most of all the plugins that I have. As you like, just by simply copying keyframes and remaining the speed and things like that, that is really, really useful for me. I can go through, maybe next month we can go through like plugins that I like to use, because that can be like a whole different rabbit hole. But I mean, if you are into like customization of like certain things and automation, if that's a word, FT Toolbar, you can basically, FT Toolbar is just empty and you add whatever you want. Like I have different expressions to separate scales. I have one to just simply purge all the cache. I have one for rig box and duplicate replace, reverse keyframes, and there's a whole bunch of others, and I'm happy to go through them eventually. But yeah, I would probably say those 2, which I guess they're not really plugins. I don't really know what you call them, but that's and there's a lot of others. It kind of depends if you want a faster workflow. It depends what is most of your work, what you do most, and that should probably help you decide what's the best plugin for you. Okay, so I'm gonna go into one more, well, maybe two more. This one will get a bit into 3D, so some of you might be excited. I know there's a bunch of 3D people out there. So John Flores, hey John, asked about this piece. And particularly, actually, there were a bunch of questions about this piece, which was exciting because this is one of the recent ones that I finished. So I can even open the After Effects file and talk more about that. Oh, here's a good example. This part, that whole part, was created just by doing what I show you guys right now, just duplicating and replacing pre-comps and rotating and whatever. So that was cool. But he was asking specifically about this section. So you have all the circles, and then that circle becomes a spiral. Now, let's see if I have some sketches of this, because that part was driving me crazy. Actually, there's not that many sketches, there's like one. But I was trying to figure out how on earth, because I had done something like this before. A long time ago at Giant Ant, where basically I was able to grab a 3D spiral and using a flat camera, where is it? Nope. Yeah, here. So I had this flat spiral in 3D, and then because of the way it was built, I was able to kind of like fake it, because that was the front view, and then this was the top view, to make it like a perfect circular spiral from the top view. And you can see, especially here, that it's pretty wonky, and because the transition was so fast, I actually got away with it quite well. But for this one, where the transition was much slower, I couldn't get away with it that easily. So I actually had to do it properly. So what I did was, yeah, I just built it in Cinema. Yeah, I mean, let me, the best way to explain it would be just to open it. So let me see if I have it here. Sorry, I thought I had it ready, but I don't. Heartline. Okay, I think this is the one. So I don't really use a lot of Cinema, and I know that, for example, in the course we haven't really covered any Cinema at all, and but I use it for the things that it just be way too complicated in After Effects, and I always try to use it in a way that still looks 2D. But yeah, so basically here's the animation for that part, and what I did is I animated 360 frames of it, and then I time remapped it for the speed that I wanted. So I'll show you what's happening here. It's not going front view. Oh. Perspective. Okay. So here's a beauty, which is very strange. So basically what I did was to divide, actually maybe I still have the bases here. Tell me I do. Yes, I do. Sweet. So what I did was basically I used the helix and created 3 of them, like just parts of it, you know, like from end to end, so they would make perfect circles. So like this is the beginning of one. You see, so that's the beginning of one side. Whoa, It's so hard to play with this small screen here. But anyway, I just made it so it's a complete circle from the front view, but it's still a spiral in the perspective view. And I did 3 of them. And this actually took so many tries to figure out. Like, I was like, at first I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do it with like a tube, and then I'm gonna texture it around the tube. And it was like, I made so many different versions, and it was like 2 days figuring that stuff out. And it was like, I had to finish 3 other shots, and I was like, no, but I need to finish this. Anyway, eventually I came up with this solution. And actually, I'll be super curious if you guys have other solutions or how you would have approached this transition. But basically, once I created those helixes, I expanded them, and I simply connected. I simply connected them after they were in the positions that I wanted in. So I created the lines in between, and that's what these helix ended up being. Let's see. So that's a helix connected, and then yeah, I mean, now that I look at it, it was like, of course, you know, that sounds like it took me so long to figure out, and that's again because I'm probably not the smartest guy, but you know, like, and because it's a front view, it looks like this, and then all I had to do was basically just animate the start and end growth, and then I rotated at the same time to create this little effect. And there you have it. So this is probably the proper, like the other one that I did for Celia, when things happen, especially around this frame, things got really crazy and weird. But this is much more controlled, I guess. Cool. So hopefully that answers that question. Yeah, and I was actually pretty happy the way it turned out. But you see, like, I rendered 360 frames, and how many am I using here? Let's say it's like starts at 52 seconds, and the transition ends at 53. So even though I rendered all that stuff, you know, that probably might have been not the smartest thing. Maybe I could have just gone it frame by frame and do it better. But you know, I like being able to have the control for that kind of stuff, because I didn't know how fast I wanted that transition to be. But anyway, so that's that. Let's see, other question. How does, well, that's about ease copy, which I think was an older question. Actually, well, someone asked about how ease copy differs from flow. I actually don't use flow, but from what I understand, flow has the exact same capabilities as ease copy. Ease copy, I could be wrong, but as far as I understand, ease copy is just a stripped down version of what flow can do, and flow has a bunch of other options. But I actually don't use that. Can you also export DXF from Cinema to get paths which you can work with Illustrator After Effects? I don't believe you can. I don't think After Effects can take path information. I could be wrong, actually. I don't know. That's a good, I don't know. And then someone else asked, do you animate the timing and ease in Cinema for D2? No, I didn't. So basically, once I exported that, as you can see, my timeline here, for the most part, is pretty linear. Like, I did add a bit of an ease here, but I knew that I wasn't gonna animate the eases here, so I tried to keep it as linear as possible and give as many frames as I could. In this case, 360, and then I exported this image sequence, which I should be able to bring in, actually, since I still have it somewhere. 1 second. Let's see. Hardline. I'm gonna import this PNG sequence, and basically I bring that in, and I do a time remap to control the speed. So in this case, it was probably about whatever, 50 frames, and maybe even shorter. And this was handy because I could also, you know, keep the circle there for longer. I could make the circle grow, for example, while it's still in frame 0. For example, like here. And then kind of became the spiral. And here I just play with the eases of the actual time remap, which I actually do quite a bit to control the actual speed that I want to for things like this. Maybe that's a bit too fast, but you get the idea. So that's where I kind of control the eases. I try to, because I know that the final animation needs to connect with the rest of the animation of the piece, and the rest of the animation of the piece is done in After Effects. So I want to be able to control the speed and eases from as much as I can from Cinema. And the way to do that is to export a baked sequence that I can just manage the speed with. I wonder how often you design your frames versus partnering with a designer. Good question, actually. It kind of depends the project. I like to think that I'm better at animation. Well, I know I'm definitely better at animation than design, but I like to think that, like, if I can collaborate with someone who can just focus on design and I can just focus on the animation, that the result will be something special. And that's partly because I'm just not as good as at designing things. So for example, for this CNN piece, it was completely designed by Raphael, who's doing a class, by the way. Yes! Ash said it last time, so I'm allowed to say it. So yeah, and in terms of like there's certain styles that I would prefer to design. For example, the Solea stuff and that kind of style, I feel like I visualize those things better. But in other ways, working with another designer, it just forces me to think of animations that I wouldn't think otherwise. I don't know if that answers the question. Oh, someone posted a cool expression. I'll have to check that one out. Okay, so before I move on to the next question, the next submission, do you prefer to work with value? Oh, someone asked that already. Value graph versus speed graph. Excuse me. Like I said, it kind of depends for which part. If it's like a position animation, I'll definitely separate things so I can control the value. For quick things and more organic movements, I would definitely prefer the speed graph. Okay, let's move on to maybe last one. Maybe we'll see. So Flores asked about this shot, which is one of my favorite shots I've ever got to work on. So question is, creating a 3D effect with 2D layers, how is it done? Pre-comp with some sort of effect? Please help. So this one is probably, actually I have an After Effects file of how I did this shot, because Jordan Scott was asking me a long time ago how I did that. So I'm gonna see if I can find it. Let's see, I have a bunch of like little After Effects things that I use all the time. Where is it? Nope. Pretty sure I sent it to him. Sorry guys, I thought I had it ready, but maybe I don't. Here's the angle. I don't know if I have it. Anyway, I can fairly quickly recreate it. So I'm gonna create a comp that is square, and I'm gonna create a simple solid. This is the key, it has to be a solid. And then I'm gonna do a mask instead of shapes. And the reason why I'm doing this is because masks have this little effect which behaves in an interesting way, which is kind of like an error, but it works wonderfully for things like this. So what I'm trying to do, just to keep you in track, is I'm gonna create this little world with lines, this world here with lines in 3D. inside After Effects. So I'm gonna create this, and I'm gonna make an effect called stroke, and an effect called stroke. And this effect, what it does, it finds whatever masks you have, and it adds a stroke around it. And here I'm gonna say do it on transparent, and it has a few settings. It has like the ins and the outs, similar to the shape effect. One thing I like to do is the hardness, to always leave it at 90 and the spacing at 5%. That's simply for the sharpness of the line. The more space you give it, it kind of creates this dotted line. So let's say I have this, and then I'm actually gonna duplicate this, and I'm gonna scale it, something like that. And one of the key things for this is, like, you'll notice that even though I scaled this solid, like the shape kind of scaled with it, the stroke, sorry, scaled with it, and I don't want that. I want the scale, the stroke to maintain all the properties, and the way to keep that is by doing this little continuous rasterize. So once I kick the continuous rasterize, no matter the scale, no matter whatever, it's always gonna keep this this strokeness. Stroke with strokeness, fancy word. And then I'm gonna make all these 3D. Right? Cool. So now that we have our boxes base, I'm gonna put this into a new pre-comp, and I'm gonna make a 3D, enable continuous rasterize, and basically this is this is really what I did. I kind of like scaled it like this, and then what I did was I duplicate this, grab this point, snapped it here, and I actually, before I did that, I moved the anchor point here. And let me move to my custom view. I don't know if you guys knew this, but you have different views in After Effects. So this is my custom view. And what I did is basically I rotated this. I did like a bit of a math to see what would work. So I did 50 degrees on that one, then I duplicated, and I added this one, and this was like whatever, 50 plus 50 will be 100. And then I did the same. This might not actually close because I don't know if my math will work for this one. It won't actually. It will have to be 60. Anyway, so this is kind of how I built it. And then when I go into my active camera, the next thing I did was actually completely, again, pre-compose this as the big lines, whatever. And I did the same, 3D continuous rasterize. And what this allows me to do is to keep playing with this whole shape as if it was like one big 3D thing. And then because I have my stroke effect, no matter how I scale it, no matter how deep I make it, ooh, don't break it, After Effects, don't break it. It does have a limit. When you have a stroke that goes way too far, After Effects doesn't know what to do, and it just goes crazy. So there is a limit, so be aware of that. But because of the stroke effect that I have going on, it keeps the width of everything, no matter if it's 3D or what. And then I can just, you know, play with this animation and stuff. And that's basically how this whole 3D, quote, 3D shot was built. I mean, obviously there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on, but that was the principle of it. And that's, you know, there was no cinema involved in that at all, which it would have been probably smarter. So anyway, there's like 7 minutes left, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff left. Oh great, Nicholas is here. Nice. Hey Nico. He's judging me, my interface and things. I used to work with Nico. Okay, so I realized that I didn't bring my charger with me. It's in the other room. So instead of leaving you with an empty desk, I'll just take maybe some last questions. I mean, there's so many other questions that people ask, and I'll definitely keep going through this list, and to keep adding them. The idea is to do it monthly, I believe. There was a bunch of other things. There were questions, more broader questions about thinking about transitions. There was one question about the leaf in here for this color scope piece, which by the way was done in Element 3D, which is awesome. Element 3D is super awesome. There was another question about how these shadows were done. And again, I can go through this later on in a different time, but like all this 3D shadows, because this was all animated in After Effects and all the shadows were created in Cinema afterwards. And I can go through that process also, which, you know, if you ask me now, I would have just done entirely the shot in 3D. So I don't know if it's a good example, but you know, it's an interesting process. But yeah, so maybe some last questions before I head out. And yeah, I don't know if this was helpful. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. It's my first stream and it's very weird to just be talking nonstop to nobody, seemingly nobody. I know you guys are there. But yeah, so let's see if we have some last questions here. Okay, it looks like, okay, what, anything last things? No, we're good? Anyway, hopefully we'll do this monthly. Like I said, this was actually funnier than I thought it was going to be, and less scary than I thought it was going to be. Will you make a part 2 of motion design course? I can't promise anything right now, but I am thinking about it, and I'm trying to figure out what would the best class be, because, you know, like the first class is almost like an introduction to motion, and what would be the next thing? Like be curious to know what you guys would like to see. Someone's asking about blend. Can't answer that either. Someone asked one actually before I go. When comparing the amount of time you spend animating to pre-planning, what is the ratio you spend actually animating versus planning things out? And that is a very good question. I mean, obviously I don't know exact numbers, but I mean, the planning, I guess the more I do it, the more I can think of faster of planning. But I do try to see, okay, here's the main shot and here's where I need to take it, like A and B, and then try to find at least 2 main elements or 3 that I know how they're gonna move, and go ahead and do those transitions. And then the remaining and secondary elements I haven't even thought of, but they'll kind of start falling into place once I figure out the first one. And sometimes I do that first planning in my head, and it's very quick and it's like 2 minutes, and then I start animating. Sometimes I need to like that heartbeat thing that took me like a day to plan, and the actual execution, once I figure out how to do it, it was probably just an hour. So it kind of varies a lot, but there's definitely, you know, and that's something that we did at Giant Ant for a bit. It was like, all the animators was like, oh, how can you have any ideas how to animate from this to this? And people will throw ideas, and that's very helpful too. So, lame answer, but it kind of depends the complexity of the shots, but there should always definitely be at least one element that you know how it's going to move, and then the rest can follow. And a good example for that would be, hope my battery doesn't die. So there's this guy. Was it this guy? No, it wasn't that guy. It was this guy. So here I kind of knew the end frame, and I basically just decided, okay, I'm gonna start with the 2. Like I only had one idea basically, that this base was gonna end at the end, at the middle, that this base was gonna start, and the head was gonna start as well. And then I basically just started animating those with the, you know, all I knew was like the first movement was going to happen, and then I just started adding shapes as I went along, and they kind of start falling into place, and a few adjustments here and there. And sometimes that doesn't work, and when you're doing it, you think of something else, and you just got to start again. And that's kind of how it goes. But yeah, anyways, this is the end of the stream, I guess. Thanks for all of you guys tuning in. A lot of people actually. So yeah, hopefully I'll see you next time, and keep adding your questions there. The more specific, the better. And I'll see you guys next month. And if you don't know about the class yet, go and check it out. Some people say it's pretty all right. I don't know. I wouldn't know. But yeah, thanks guys. Have a nice day.